Hey there, welcome back to my channel. Let's continue with our series. In the previous episode, we have covered how we can send the SMS using Twilio. In this video, we are going to cover how we can become a seller. In a normal way, we have registered our user, and the normal user cannot have the capability of adding the product, right? So somehow we need to provide that accessibility, that particular privileges where user can become a seller and they can create the product. So the normal user can buy the product. So that is the mechanism today we are going to do, right? So right now, if you can see in this product here in the product image, right, that this product image is exactly, it belongs to a seller, right? So where seller can manage the products, seller can manage the category as well as and product as well as. And if you see the product table, you can see this particular attribute that is called the user ID, which is potentially a foreign key that is pointed to our user table, right? So we are not keeping a separate table for seller and for buyer because this is a kind of C2C portal. So in the C2C portal, you can keep the seller separately, but this is not ideal. At any point of time, the normal buyer or normal user also maybe become a seller also, right? So this is going to be an ideal thing, like just to keep the user table in one single site, or maybe keep the user in a one single table, and at any point of time they can convert to seller also. Or other way around also you can maintain a separate table for seller, but it's up to you how you can maintain the business logic accordingly, right? We are not going to make it too complicated. Our main agenda is to fulfill the whole e-commerce platform we are going to build it using Go from the start to end. So that is what we are going to cover, right? So, and as you can see here, while we are becoming a seller, we have plenty of other stuff also we need to cover. Besides the managed product, we have the orders, we have the shipping, right? So once shipping is coming to the picture, then we need to integrate the shipping third-party service also, right? And we need to see the transaction. So how many products as of now this week we have received the orders. So seller can make an estimate of like how much product has been sold and how much money they just gain. All these things also we need to keep track, right? So these are the things we are going to cover basically, right? So our agenda is pretty clear. We are going to continue with this. All right, then let's jump into the source code. All right, so now we can see here in the private endpoints, we have covered how to verify the user, right? So this create profile and get profile feature, we're going to do right after adding the card also, because that's not necessary at this moment, right? So at this moment, only the necessary thing we need to cover the become a seller, right? So let's go to the become seller handler. Here in the become seller handler, you can see we have not added any code, right? So let's try to add a couple of lines of the code here, and then we are good to go, right? So first, what we need to do, we need to grab the authenticated user, right? Here we need to provide this user to our service, where in the service we are going to update the user and we will make that normal user to a seller, right? So let's try to do that. But before that, what we need to do, we need to grab the request also. So request will be something like this. So if you go to here in the Postman Collection, this Postman Collection already I have added to the repository, and you can find it in the down below in the video description as well as. So these are the attributes we are going to receive from our front end, right? So where this is the endpoint, that is the become seller, and these are the informations exactly it's going to be needed for to join the seller program, right? So that is what we need to do. So let's try to grab all this piece of code from here, and let's go here. And what we can do, let's go to our DTO file. Where is DTO? This is the DTO file. And here, if you go to user request, let's try to create one struct here. This is going to be like type, and we can put it here. So it is asking me whether I can generate the type from the session. Yes, go ahead. And can you see it is just created the type for me, right? So what we can do, we can rename this one as a kind of seller input, right? Perfect. So now we have our seller input struct. So where we are accepting first name, last name, phone number, bank account number, SWIFT code, and payment type. So these are the some of the things we need to capture for our seller, because while you are receiving the payment, all the transactions has to be received right there. Then somehow we need to transfer that money to the seller account as well as, right? So this is why those are the informations are needed. So now let's go back to our user handler again. And here, what we are going to do, we're going to validate our request, whether it is perfectly parsed or not, right? So if it is not perfectly parsed or the request is not correct, then we are going to return some kind of error. All right, so let's try to add some code quickly. Perfect. So now we have added the request and we have validated our request right here to parse from the body. And we are looking at if any errors are there, then we are returning something from here. That is potentially a bad request. And we are sending some kind of message also there, right? So this is the way we are just trying to validating this stuff. And let's try to omit all these empty spaces. So it will look clean. So now we have our authenticated user and we have our request. So we'll be going to add some code in our service as well as where this normal user we can convert to a seller, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, let's go to the service and go to user service here. So here we have our sign up, we have our login, and we have our verification code. And do we have a seller one? Yes, become a seller. Can you see? We have one function that is called become seller, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, what we are going to do, instead of this input, we're going to provide some kind of input that is already we have added here. This is going to be like our seller input, right? All right, so here, this input will be our DTO.seller input, right? So this is the thing we are going to add it here. So here you can see in this become seller function, we are returning the string and arrow as well as, right? So this string will be our updated version of the token. So in the normal token, while we are dealing with the normal token, then we have the user type is a kind of buyer. But in this case, we need to, right after become a seller, then the user type has to be seller, right? So that is the thing we need to do. But nothing to worry. First of all, let's try to handle one problem at a time. So here, what we can do, let's try to add as a token and error from handler.service. And here, become a seller, we are going to provide the DTO. That DTO will be our this input. But first of all, can you see we are adding the ID also. That particular ID will be from our user ID. So user.id, and here we can provide the input. This is going to be our request. All right, perfect. So now we have our token. So once we are receiving this token, so make sure like this token we are going to provide back to our user. So how we are providing for our normal login user. So let's go ahead and check it out here, because that particular response has to be matched in the front end. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Front end has to deal with that particular response in a different way. So right now we are returning this status as a login and token as a token, right? And sign up also we are doing the same thing. So let's try to copy this one from here. And what we can do, we can just copy this error as well as, because we need to handle that error also, right? If it is throwing from this error, then we need to handle it. So let's try to add it. Now, if we see any kind of error, then what we are going to do, then we are going to say fail to become seller, right? So fail to become seller. This is perfect. Now this is not going to be login, become seller, and this token will be our token. Perfect. So our handler is perfectly handled, right? So once we are receiving this request, like become a seller, then we are going to grab the authorized user from here, and we have parsed our request here. Then we are performing that particular call with our service, right? Then service will be perform some kind of request to update that particular thing to our database. Then it is giving back the token, and we are giving back to the user, right? So this is what we are going to call. Then we are going to receive that particular request. Perfect. So now we have set everything here in the handler, right? Now let's go to become seller function of the service. All right, so here in the become seller function, we need to add a couple of steps, right? So let's try to list all the steps, what we are going to perform in order to make the normal user to become a seller, right? So first thing, let's try to find the existing user. Then let's try to update the user, right? Then what we are going to do, once we have updated the user, let's try to make sure like we are generating the token. So that is, we need to give it back, right? while we are going to have the particular response from this function, that is we need to give it back in the line number 169, right, from here. But one more thing we need to do, because once the user is becoming seller, then definitely we need to store the bank information also somewhere, right? So let's make sure like we're going to store that bank information. So create bank account information, right? Perfect. So these are the things we need to do, right? And once this is done, then we are going to give it back the particular token from here, right? But here in this case, if we are finding the user and user is already exist and it is already a buyer, make sure we are returning some kind of error message also, right? Return already joined seller program, right? So this is what we need to do. All right, so these are the steps we are going to add, and let's make sure whatever the required the entity or domains we have added right here. As an example, the account informations, that particular thing has to be exist right here. So let's go to domain here, and we're going to create one more domain that is going to be our bank account, right? .go. Perfect. Let's go to our user, and you can see this is pretty much similar type of the pattern we are going to follow. Only thing we are care about the ID and the created and updated at. These are a couple of common things we are going to utilize everywhere in the entities. Otherwise, you can use the Go ORM model also, but we want to have a little bit flexibility as per our requirement. We can keep it right there. So that's why we are not using that one, but we can use like this one. All right. So let's try to copy all these things from here. Let's go to bank account, and here let's try to rename this entity as a kind of bank account, and ID will be perfectly fine. This is going to be our user ID. User ID will be UINT, right? And this is going to be our user ID, right? That particular bank account belongs to user, right? So that is what we are saying right here. And next will be bank account number. Bank account. This is going to be our UINT, right? Bank account. And third one will be our Swift code, right? This is going to be string and Swift code, and this is not required at all, right? And maybe what we can do, we can just keep this index right here in the bank account, right? Because sometimes we need to source the bank account by putting some kind of number from the front end. And in that case, the index is going to be helpful for us, right? Then Swift code is perfectly fine. Then payment type. Payment type will be a kind of string, right? So this is going to be payment type. This is going to be underscore, right? And another one we can just like say maybe created and updated at, right? So let's try to omit all those things from here, right? Cool. So we have our user ID. This is going to be bank ID, and this is our user ID, and this is our bank account number, Swift code, payment type, right? Payment type can be maybe weekly, maybe monthly, or something like that. It is not just kind of card or something, right? And the created and updated at, it's going to be needed at any point of time you are trying to check the record, right? So this is our bank account, right? And now let's go to the user, right? So what are the things we need to update right there? We will be update our first name, last name, and let's check it out. Then phone number, right? Yeah, phone number is going to be needed. We have our phone number. Then our rest of all the bank information. Perfect. So now our user entity and the bank account entity is perfectly it's updated, right? So we can utilize it. So let's go to here in the user repository. So here are a couple of functions we are going to add. First thing we are going to add like the create bank account. This is going to be our domain name. This is going to be you can say entity, right? Or whatever the attributes you can put is just, it's up to you, but try to just to keep it meaningful a little bit. So domain.bank account, right? And here we are just returning error only, right? This is perfectly fine for us, right? So let's try to delete all these things from here. So in the repository, we can just like hover it and implement in the click on the implement missing methods. So it will going to create the functions for you automatically. Or you can just copy paste this one, this particular functions from here, and you can create a kind of receiver function just like this, right? That's other way around it's gonna work, right? All right, so let's try to create our bank account here, right? So in this case, return r.db.create, and here we will say pointed to our entity, all right? And finally return the error. Perfect. So now we are just creating the bank account from here, because this domain, this bank account will be having the user ID information as well as. So this is the same thing, which is exactly it belongs to from here, from the user, this ID, right? Perfect. So now we have created our bank account here, and let's check it out. Our updated user is also, it's updated correctly with all the required codes, right? So if you see here in updated user, we have already updated everything correctly, right? So this is our user, and we are just creating a kind of variable. And finally, we're adding our clause to return everything, and we are updating our user. Yeah, this is the input, right? This is the domain name, right? Perfect. So now, then we can go to our user service and we can add all these codes one by one, right? So here, let's try to find the user by ID. Okay, so in this case, user, and we are not caring about our error, and we will say the service.repo.find user by ID, right? And ID, we can pass it from here, this ID. All right, so now we have our user here, right? So now let's try to compare our user here. This is going to be if the user type is equal, right? If it is a kind of seller or buyer, that is we need to cover. So let's go here in the domain here, go to user, and we can see here our user type is our default is a buyer, right? So we will check if it's a kind of seller, then definitely we need to return it back, right? So let's try to add it here, seller. Then what we can do, we will say return will be, token will be empty. Then error will be our error new text. This is going to be saying you have already joined the seller program. So you have already joined the seller program. So this is what we are going to throw from here, right? So for this comparison, user type is seller. That what we can do, we can declare a kind of enum also, right? So let's go to here in the user domain, right? Let's try to add one enum right here. This is going to be like const, and we can say something like this. Inside a pair of parentheses, inside that we can say seller will be our seller, and buyer will be our buyer. Perfect. So this seller and buyer we can just use, right, accordingly, right? So what we can do now, let's go here in the user service. So instead of this seller, what we can do, we will say domain dot seller. So if it is seller, right, if it is a type of seller, then we will returning this error from here, right? But this is how we can implement the enum as well as, right? Now let's go ahead here and update the user. So in this case, let's try to grab the seller, right? We will say seller and error, and we will say s.repo and update the user. So which user we are going to update? This user, right? So this user already has an ID, that is we are passing from here. Let's try to grab that ID. And inside here, what we are going to do, we are going to add the domain user and all the required informations, all the input we have received from this input, that is we are going to send it here. So let's try to add it quickly. Perfect. So now we have added all the required inputs here, right? Now let's try to check it out whether we have any errors, right? If we have any errors, right? Then try to return empty string and the error, right? Now we are having left the seller, right? So in this case, what we are going to do, we are going to generate the token. So let's go here in the login function, right? So in the login function, you can see we're generating the token, right? So this is the thing which is we need to return here, right? Just to try to copy from here. and add it right here as well as, right? So in this case, we are going to say token, right? Then let's try to add it here. So it may throw the error as well as, I think, error, yeah. Right, so in this case, we have our user and we have our user ID and the user type. So this time, this user type, we are not going to send from here because this is not been updated as a seller, right? So what we need to do, we need to just grab this code from here. This is going to be our seller, right? Try to copy this one and add it here, right? Then user type. Now everything is set. So this token is right now, we need to add it there. But one last thing we need to do, that is we need to create our bank account. So let's try to create the bank account as well as. So in this case, account will be our domain dot bank account. And let's try to add all the parameters quickly. Perfect. So it seems like everything is going well, but here's the thing. This bank account number, somehow we have added as a kind of string, right? So let's go ahead here in the input. So consider this is a kind of int, maybe int, right? Integer, or maybe we can put uint, int. All right. So now it has to be complied correctly. Yes, correct. So now it is done, right? So in this case, let's try to create our bank account s.repo and they create bank account. Create bank account. We're simply passing this account. All right. So this is the way we can do. Otherwise, what you can do, you can directly create this bank account also, and you can pass it on here. So this is going to be also gonna work, but it's pretty much sometimes if you wish to debug like whether you have received the correct input or not. In this case, you can utilize like this way, right? So you have the possibility to just log it out to the bank account number right here, right? So other way around, it's gonna work. So let's try to use the short version of this one. So you can create the bank account accordingly, right? So now what we need to do, we need to capture the error as well as. So do we have any errors? So if we have any errors, so make sure we're returning this error also. So let's try to grab this error from here and add it right there, right? So can you see this error is complaining because there's no extra parameter we have added and we have already declared one error right here. So Go is smart enough to capture it like this is the same error we can reutilize, right? So reuse. So let's try to remove these new declarations from here. So the error has gone now. Perfect. So now we have covered everything, right? So we have completed the become a seller function, right? So now let's go here in the server file where we need to take care of the migration also, because we have added a new entity right here inside the domain, right? The bank account. So that is also we need to create it in our Postgres, right? So make sure that is executed correctly. So in this case, what we can do, let's go here in the API and go to the server, right? And here you can see we are running the migration. So let's try to add one error attribute here, right? So in this case, error, we will see if any error is there. If any error is there, then we will say, so if anything is going wrong while doing the migration, then we will check it out here. And after that, you can add a line also here, a log also, just like this, right? So now let's try to add the table also, the new entity we have created here right after this domain. We will say domain dot bank account, right? Perfect. So now let's try to spin our application, make server, right? So yeah, perfect. So you can see database connected, migration was successful. And if you go to the database, right? So I'm using data grep. So in this case, this is our database. This is Go e-commerce local, and let's try to refresh the application. And you can see we have two tables, right? One is the bank account, one is the user, right? So this is the time where we will try to test it out, or become a seller, right? So in this case, there is no any data in our table, right? So let's try to create a user from there. Perfect. So we have login. Now we can verify our user. That is already we did in our previous episode. Let's go to our seller section. Here in the seller program, we're going to join this seller program. So make sure this endpoint is matching here. And go to the source code. here, go to our REST handlers, and we can see our user handler. Where's our endpoints? So become seller. Yeah, this is perfect, right? So let's try to call that one, but make sure like authorization is used correctly. So we are using the authorization, inherit authorization from parent. So let's try to make this call, right? Send. It says the request parameters are not valid. So where exactly the problem it is? So definitely we have some problem that is going to be our bank account number we are sending as a kind of string. So let's try to make it number, right? Now just try to send it out. Can you see? We are receiving the correct response. Perfect. So now we can see the message is coming as a become a seller, right? And if you copy this token from here, right? Let's try to copy this token from here, right? But before that, before copy this token, let's go ahead here in the login section. Maybe go to the login tab. Okay, not this one. I think user login tab, and just to try to copy this token first, right? And copy this one. And now let's go to our zwt.io. Here, let's open this new tab here, zwt.io. And here let's try to encode this token, the copied one. And if we see here, the rule is buyer, right? So this buyer, if our role is buyer, then we cannot perform the product operations, right? Now let's go here once again to the Postman, and let's try to this join seller program, the token number, right? This one, let's try to copy this one and add it here as well as. Now check it out, like whether we have changed the seller or not. Yeah, see, can you see the role is seller right now? So right now, if we are performing any kind of operations by using this token, then definitely we able to manage the products. Now let's go to our database as well as, right? So if you go to see the database right here and try to refresh it, right? Then you can see our user type is seller. And if you go to the bank account, then you can see we have our bank account information as well as. So now we have accepted how we can become the seller. So in the next episode, what we are going to do, we are going to move forward with our product catalog where we'll be creating our products. So, and after that, we're going to cover this one. Once our products are ready, then we are going to move forward with again the updated profile, the cart, orders, etc. So then why exactly this profile or all those stuff is going to be needed at that point? Because right before buying the product, you need to create your address, create your some of the information that is going to be very, very helpful to receive the products with the help of some kind of the courier service, right? So those are the things we are going to handle right here. And after that, adding the cart items to the cart, etc. I hope you have enjoyed this video tutorial. In the next episode, we are going to cover all those stuff. And meanwhile, you can just go to the repository and give a star right there if you really like the source code. And yeah, of course, I would like to see you in another episode. Bye-bye.